Just 3 days before the court hearing, I got an unexpected call from a woman named Alina. She said she used to work with the HOA's president back in the city as her personal assistant. At first, I was suspicious, but then she mentioned something that stopped me cold. Apparently, this wasn't the first time the HOA president had pulled a stunt like this. According to Alina, she'd done something similar a few years ago in another lake town, bought influence, bullied property owners, and quietly turned farmland into luxury lake properties. The difference? That time, she'd gotten away with it because no one fought back. Alina said she felt guilty for staying quiet back then and wanted to help me now. She emailed over files she'd saved, old emails, real estate plans, zoning maps, and even a draft of a proposal labeled Lakeside Expansion Phase 2 with my ranch clearly marked for demolition. That proposal was dated months before she ever stepped foot near my land. This wasn't an accident or a misunderstanding. She had planned this from the start. The twist: the proposal was addressed to a private investment group, one tied to a company she quietly owned. Meaning, she wasn't just representing the HOA, she was flipping land under the table for her own gain. If this got out in court, it could destroy her whole plan. But I also knew it made me a bigger target. And sure enough, that same night, my internet went down, my mailbox was torn off its post, and someone tried to disable the security cameras on my fence. She knew I was getting closer to exposing her. And now she was desperate. The court date was near, but I had no idea what she might try next door, how far she'd go to stop me. The courtroom was packed that morning. A few reporters sat quietly in the back, and even some of my neighbors showed up, nodding to me as I walked in. Across the room, she sat in a sharp blazer, calm and confident like always. Her attorney opened with a speech full of charm and legal jargon, painting her as a community-minded woman simply trying to enhance the shared environment. But I didn't flinch. When it was our turn, my lawyer laid it all out. The historics, registration, the photos, the camera footage, and finally, the documents Alina had sent. The room shifted. Her smile faded the moment those files hit the judge's desk. The court went silent when the zoning proposal appeared on the screen, clearly marked with her name, dates, and the investment company linked directly to her. She stood up, tried to deny it, but it was too late. The judge leaned forward, clearly unimpressed, and asked one simple question. If you had no plans to redevelop, why was this proposal written before demolition ever started? It was the first time I saw her panic. Within an hour, the judge ruled in my favor. She was ordered to pay for all damages, legal costs, and issue a formal public apology. The HOA was placed under review, and her connections to the investment firm were forwarded to state authorities. I walked out with my land, my title, and a promise that no one could touch it again. But just as I stepped outside, a lawyer leaned in and said quietly, "You're not going to believe this. That investment firm, they're also tied to 3 other small towns across the state." That's when I realized this wasn't just about my ranch. It was part of something much bigger. After the ruling, the weight on my shoulders finally lifted. For the first time in weeks, I stood on my porch and looked out over the land without that gnawing pit in my stomach. The barn would take time to rebuild, but knowing it was protected and that no one could take it away meant everything. Neighbors started stopping by more often, not just to check in, but to share their own stories. Turns out, a few had felt pressure from that same group she was working with, but now, with her exposed and the court ruling in black and white, they felt safer standing their ground. Alina ended up giving a full statement to investigators, and her testimony opened the door to a much wider probe. That investment firm, it was now under review in multiple counties for shady land grabs tied to fake HOAs and false zoning violations. The state attorney general's office even contacted me for a formal statement. I never thought defending my ranch would lead to that. But it felt good knowing the fight didn't just protect my land, it might stop this from happening to others too. We've since started a small community group to help folks understand property laws and how to spot warning signs of land scams. I've seen firsthand how easily a few slick words and official-looking forms can scare people into giving up what they love. But I've also learned how powerful truth, persistence, and a few well-timed documents can be now. Every time I walk that stretch near the lake where her fancy sign once stood, I remind myself why it was worth it. That land isn't just dirt and grass. It's memory, legacy, and something worth fighting for. And no HOA or developer can ever change that. A few days after the destruction, I started hearing whispers around town. Turns out, I wasn't the first person she'd pushed around. An older couple down the road had suddenly agreed to sell their lakeside cabin after weeks of being harassed with zoning threats. Another neighbor claimed his boat dock was mysteriously flagged as unsafe after refusing her buyout. She wasn't just targeting me, she was carving out her own little empire along the lake. And no one knew how far she'd go to get it. The more I dug, the worse it got. I found out she'd been attending local board meetings, quietly suggesting updates to the zoning codes. She even got a couple of HOA members from another neighborhood to vouch for her influence. She was moving like a storm, all charm on the surface. But underneath it was control, slow, quiet, and planned. Meanwhile, the damage on my land wasn't just cosmetic. My barn's main beam was split. Livestock had wandered off, and a section of fencing that bordered the lake was completely destroyed. She'd acted like it was a landscaping tweak, but it had real consequences. My insurance didn't want to touch it until liability was proven. And every time I tried to get answers, someone seemed suddenly too nervous to talk. Then came the paperwork she filed against me. She claimed my barn violated visual harmony of the lakefront and submitted requests to limit agricultural activity near her side of the water. That was my tipping point. I wasn't going to let her rewrite my land's legacy just because it didn't fit her glossy brochure dream. But as I started building my case, I realized I wasn't just fighting one woman. I was going up against a quiet network with deep pockets and big plans. By the end of the month, my ranch looked like a war zone. Piles of broken wood sat where the barn used to stand tall. The pasture near the lake had been fenced off by her crew. And, worst of all, she had the nerve to plant a "coming soon" Lakeside Estates sign just yards from my porch. I knew she was baiting me, hoping I'd lose my temper or do something she could use against me. But I stayed focused. I had everything documented, the footage from my trail cameras, before and after photos, and copies of the historic registry that listed my ranch as protected property. I also started getting calls from reporters at the local news station. Word had spread, and people were beginning to ask questions that didn't sit well with her. She sent a cease and desist through her attorney, claiming I was spreading lies and trying to damage her reputation. The irony nearly made me laugh. She'd crushed part of my family's history for her real estate dream, and now she wanted to play the victim. But then things got worse. One morning, I found the front gate padlock cut open and fresh tire tracks across the field. Whoever it was had come at night, probably to move equipment or stake more flags. I called the sheriff, but there wasn't much they could do without catching anyone in the act. It was clear she wasn't backing down. If anything, she was accelerating her plan, hoping to bulldoze through before anyone could stop her. What she didn't know was that I had a court date locked in. And not just any judge, one who'd handled land rights cases for over 20 years. I'd kept quiet long enough. The moment of truth was coming, and I wasn't walking in alone. It all started with a letter taped to my gate, stamped by the HOA, but I didn't even live in their community. My family's ranch, standing tall for over 150 years, had seen generations grow, storms roll in, and neighbors come and go. It was more than just land and wood. It was history. It was home. But to the new HOA president down the road, a woman who thought her lake mansion gave her power over everything she could see, it was just an eyesore near her view. At first, it was little things. Noise complaints about my tractor. At 8 a.m., letters demanding I repaint my barn to match her luxury color scheme. Even though we were outside her jurisdiction, I ignored them. Then one morning, I woke up to the sound of chainsaws and bulldozers. She brought a crew, claimed she had temporary permission, and before I could stop her, half of my barn was in pieces and the fence was ripped out. Her excuse: she wanted to improve the lakefront appeal for her upcoming real estate listing. I stood there, watching as 150 years of my family's sweat and memory got torn down like it was nothing. But I didn't yell. I didn't fight. I let her finish. Because what she didn't know is that I had something stronger than her arrogance. Proof, paperwork, and a quiet little call I'd already made to a lawyer who specialized in historic land rights and property abuse. And let's just say, the courtroom was a lot less comfortable than her lakeside patio. You won't believe what happened when the judge read the final ruling and how I made sure this never happens to another landowner again. The ranch wasn't just some random patch of land. It had been in my family since before the town even had a name. My great-great-grandfather built the first part of the barn by hand. Hell. And every generation after added to it, a room here, a post there. We weren't rich, but we had roots, and those roots ran deep. When my parents passed it down to me, they didn't just give me property, they gave me a promise to protect it. I never thought I'd have to defend it from someone like her. She moved in last year, big lake mansion. Glass walls, gated driveway. Rumor had it she was from the city, made her money flipping homes, and now decided to beautify the area for what she called modern living. I guess my cattle, dirt paths, and antique fencing didn't fit into her idea of luxury. But what really got under my skin was how she acted like she owned the entire shoreline, even the land that wasn't hers. One neighbor told me she'd been making quiet offers to buy up property along the lake. Another mentioned she had connections. At the county office, I didn't think much of it until I saw survey flags creeping into my field, almost 50 feet past the actual line. Then came that day she brought in her crew. No warning, no papers in hand, just confidence and a clipboard. She claimed she had verbal agreements and that this was just phase 1 of the redevelopment plan. She smiled like she'd already won. But I knew something she didn't. The ranch had been registered as a historic property a few years back, and I had every document to prove it. She had messed with the wrong piece of land. And the wrong man.